Hi everybody, it's Mr. Like. I want to introduce you today to Princess. Princess is my wife's dog. We've had her for a couple of years. She's pretty much full grown. Can you think of some of the traits that Princess has that are inherited? Remember, inherited traits are things that you get from your ancestors or your parents and grandparents. What are some things that Princess got from her parents? Can you think of any? What about the color of her fur? Do you think that her parents were probably white? Or at least had that gene that they passed on to Princess? What about her size? Princess is not going to grow to be a giant dog. She's just a tiny little Maltese. She's going to stay this size because that's her inherited trait. The color of her eyes is an inherited trait. Even these tears that she gets as her eyes water and gets onto her fur, that's a lot of Malteses have those tears. These are all inherited traits. Can you think of any traits that Princess got that are maybe learned? Things that she had to figure out or we had to train her that she learned. What are some traits that you do train a dog with? Well, Princess knows that if she goes potty outside, she gets a treat. She also knows where her food is so she can find her food and water every day. She also knows not to go to the bathroom in the house. Princess has lots of traits that we've taught her. She knows how to fetch, how to sit, how to beg. So we have quite a few traits that Princess has learned. Let's see if you can't figure out the difference between learned traits and inherited traits with all kinds of other animals. On your worksheet, you're going to see that there's a bunch of traits that I've labeled for you. They're all in kind of a table with a bunch of different rows and columns. Underneath that, you'll see that there's a table that says inherited traits and learned traits. Can you copy and paste each of those traits into the right column? I've done a couple of them for you. Move the traits from the table up top to the blue table below that shows if it's an inherited trait or if it's a learned trait. Take your time doing this and really think about, is this something that someone had to learn after they were born? Or is this something that they were born with as an inherited trait? Take some time doing this, and when you're done, go ahead and unpause this and we'll move on. All right, how did you do? Do you think you got the right learned traits and the right inherited traits? Let's think about a couple of them and just see if you got them. What about a wolf cub learning to hunt? Well, if you're learning to hunt with the pack, that's going to be a learned trait. That's different than a tiger being born with stripes. A tiger doesn't have to learn that it has stripes. It's just born with stripes. Its parents had stripes. It has stripes. That's an inherited trait. What about a boy born with brown eyes? A boy born with brown eyes is going to be inherited from their parents. Maybe their parents had brown eyes, or one of their parents had brown eyes, and now they have brown eyes. So the difference between an inherited trait and a learned trait is that learned traits are things that you figure out after you're born, and inherited traits are things that you're born with. Here's a list of what your answer should look like, so you can check to see how you did. Go ahead and pause this video and check your answers against these to see if you got them right. Now that we really know what a learned trait is and an inherited trait, I want to introduce you to a very special spider. Nefertiti the Spidernaut by Darcy Patterson. Now this book is about Nefertiti the Spidernaut. It's a spider that went into space on the International Space Station. They had a contest, a YouTube Space Lab contest, and the winner was a 16-year-old Egyptian boy named Amir Muhammad. And he had this really cool idea. He knew that jumping spiders jump to get their prey. I think we knew that too.
Not all spiders build webs. In fact, about half of spider species have other clever ways to catch food. For example, jumping spiders use their excellent vision to detect prey, and then they pounce on it.
He wondered if, in space where there's no gravity, if a jumping spider could still catch its prey. Because it would jump, but then it would just float around. So could a jumping spider learn to hunt in space? This is a true story. Let's find out. Nefertiti, the spider knot. Early in 2012, in a greenhouse near Yarnell, Arizona, a Johnson jumping spider laid an egg sac. About the same time, Stephanie Countryman was looking for a jumping spider to send on a space mission. Scientists hypothesized, or predicted, that jumping spiders would not be able to hunt in the microgravity of the International Space Station. On Earth, a spider would jump to catch its food and then land on the ground. On the International Space Station, however, there's little gravity to pull them back down. Instead, the spider would just float. The egg sac arrived in Stephanie's office in Boulder, Colorado on Friday afternoon in February 2012. The package included a bag of fruit fly larvae for the spiderlings to eat. Stephanie placed the spider egg sac and the open bag of fruit fly larvae into a covered box for the weekend. On Monday morning, Stephanie was horrified. Dozens of tiny spiderlings, just the size of a pinhead, had hatched. Almost all of the fruit flies had hatched too, and the mass of flies had killed most of the spiderlings. Only 4 jumping spiders were still alive for Stephanie to raise. One day, Stephanie had to choose a spider for the space mission. She chose the largest female spider because her red abdomen was easy to see. She was also the most active spider. They named her Nefertiti after the ancient Egyptian queen. Before the experiment could fly on the International Space Station, the spider had to be tested in its special habitat, or home. The spider's home measured 6 inches wide, 5 inches high, and 3 inches deep, about the size of a man's hand. The spider habitat had a chamber for water. The other chambers held fruit flies, which Nefertiti would hunt and eat for her 100 days in space. For the first survival test, Nefertiti lived for a week with no light. That was hard because she only hunted by day. Later, she spent a week in extreme cold. The light and cold tests didn't bother Nefertiti, so scientists agreed Nefertiti would be the spider knot. In July, Stephanie fed Nefertiti until she was gorged and her abdomen was big. She wouldn't eat again until she reached the space station. Stephanie took Nefertiti in her habitat and flew from Colorado to Japan. And then they traveled to the island of Tanegashima. There, on July 17th, Nefertiti was handed over to the Japanese Space Agency. They packed Nefertiti and her equipment first into a container number 1094, and then into the HTV-3 unmanned cargo carrier. Rain poured on July 21st, but the HTV-3 launched anyway. Stephanie wondered, would the spider not return to Earth alive? 6 days later, the HTV berthed, or attached, to the International Space Station. The spider experiment was unpacked. Nefertiti got her first look at Sunita, or Suni Williams. She's a captain in the U.S. Navy, and an astronaut who would take care of her. First, Suni unpacked and set up the habitat. Nefertiti and the fruit flies floated about. As usual, Nefertiti spun a silk line and attached it to the wall as a tether. She leapt for a fruit fly. On Earth, Nefertiti jumped in an arc and almost never missed her prey. But in the microgravity of the International Space Station, she hung almost weightless in the air, just as the scientists had predicted. Hungry, she tried again and missed. For 3 hours a day, Stephanie watched the video feed from the International Space Station and worried. Clinging to the balsa wood walls, Nefertiti ran around looking for food. On July 24th, Nefertiti stalked a fruit fly. This time, instead of leaping in an arc, she jumped in a straight line. She caught the fruit fly. The hypothesis was wrong. The Johnson jumping spider did adapt to microgravity. Nefertiti learned to jump in a new way to catch her food. Even more surprising, a few days later, Stephanie saw Nefertiti hunt again. This time, she anchored her dragline and leapt for a fruit fly in midair. She caught the fly, and like a bungee cord, her dragline pulled her back to the habitat's wall. Nefertiti was hunting as no other jumping spider had ever hunted before. After 2 weeks of videotaping, the experiment was officially over. However, it would be 11 more weeks before the space capsule could return Nefertiti to Earth. Suni kept Nefertiti's habitat near her work desk. She often stopped to watch the spider hunt and eat, and the spider often stopped to watch Suni moving around. Sometime late in December, Nefertiti caught and ate the last fruit fly in her habitat. Now she lived on just water. Meanwhile, the International Space Station flew around and around the Earth. In all, Nefertiti circled Earth 1,584 times. Over a month later, on October 27th, Suni packed Nefertiti and her habitat for the return trip to Earth. Suni wrote in her NASA blog, "Hang in there, there are many more fruit flies on Earth." The Dragon capsule splashed down on October 28th in the Pacific Ocean near Long Beach, California. When Stephanie opened the habitat, Nefertiti was alive, but barely. Somehow during the return trip, her water compartment had been closed off. Immediately, Stephanie gave Nefertiti a wet cotton ball, and the spider drank and drank. Back in Colorado, Nefertiti had one last test. Would she be able to readapt to Earth's gravity and hunt? She lived for over 40 days with no food. Her abdomen was almost flat. A fruit fly buzzed around in the spider's habitat. Nefertiti anchored the dragline and sprung. She overshot the fruit fly and slammed into the front of the window of the habitat. She tumbled to the floor onto her back. She righted herself again and lunged again for the fruit fly. She missed. Again she pounced and missed. Desperately hungry, Nefertiti stalked the fruit fly. She crept forward 1 step, 2 steps, and then she leapt and ate. Nefertiti had relearned how to hunt on Earth. For several weeks, Stephanie fattened up the spider knot with little crickets. 9 months old, Nefertiti finally had enough to eat. But a famous spider knot couldn't live in Stephanie's kitchen counter. On November 29th, Nefertiti flew again. This time she traveled to Washington, D.C., where she would live in the O. Orkin Insect Zoo at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Sadly, on December 3rd, keepers found Nefertiti, the spider knot, dead of old age. In her 10-month life, Nefertiti traveled over 42 million miles. She hunted on Earth and surprised scientists by hunting successfully in space.
Her life journey had built excitement for the space program. And perhaps along the way, she taught some people to appreciate the simple beauty of a spider. Nefertiti, the Spidernaut. Nefertiti really was a pretty cool spider. The last thing we have on your worksheet is for you to make a proposal for a type of animal that you think we should take up in the International Space Station. Can you think of an animal that has something on Earth that would be kind of funny to look at without any gravity in the International Space Station? So on your worksheet, you can make a proposal. What kind of animal would you put up there? What kind of experiment would you want to do? Go ahead and write up something that you think would be a great idea to put on the International Space Station as an experiment that we can figure something out about how animals live on the Earth. Good luck and have fun. If you have any questions, please contact your teacher, and they're definitely going to give you some help. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.